Vincent Palmer. For we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but with the powers above, with the principalities, with the rulers of this world of darkness, with the evil spirits in the circles of heaven. Ephesians 6:12. After more than 5 years of experience investigating serial murders, Inspector Charles Cavan, pronounced Kedgwin, was finally able to sign off on the report to officially close the case. This case still exuded the horror left behind by the guilty party, Vincent Palmer. For Charles, this personal and fresh experience haunted him every time that he returned home late at night after a long day of work, each time being accompanied by the conviction that Vincent Palmer was lurking just around the corner of a building, behind a tree, across the street, beyond the threshold of his house, or in the closet of his bedroom. For the first 4 years of the investigation, except for the amount of time it took and number of victims, here was nothing unusual or out of the ordinary about it, nothing that common logic could deny. It was a psychopath with a standard psychological profile for someone of his kind. The past year and a half, or to be more precise, 1 year, 4 months and 23 days, have been different from all known patterns of Vincent Palmer. Initially, it was thought by some of the truly world-renowned authorities involved in this case that their prime suspect had developed a loyal following in America, Europe, and Asia, not excluding Africa, and this could have played a role in the madness. This theory, of faithful copying his vile deeds, was quickly rubbished after witnesses that were hard to find unanimously confirmed that Palmer had been seen in the vicinity of the indicated places where the crime took place. This was somewhat feasible, because of the very small period of time between one crime and the other. Difficult but feasible. Madmen do not usually pay attention to details like time and distance, but they are guided by their delusional belief of what they are doing, so this was not considered unnatural. In this case, however, there was a bit of a snag. Vincent had travelled, so he must have left some sort of record behind. It turned out, however, that no such a person bought tickets, neither for any airplane flight nor for any ship cruise. So how did he get to another continent without using these means of transportation? 2 options emerge in this case. 1, he had false documents, which was very likely. 2, he had connections and could travel freely without the risk of being treated as a stowaway. The first option could be quickly ruled out after a careful review of the surveillance footage was made, showing that no one with his face had boarded either any plane or ship. The second option was also 90% ruled out. All crews relevant to the investigation were questioned several times to uncover a possible accomplice, but all suspected indirect accomplices were excluded due to the credibility of the testimony. This topic was finally closed, and the police had to take a small step forward. All the leads that the police had been clinging to turned upside down were at one point, after experts established that the 2 murders, one in Minnesota, North America, and the other in the center of Paris, Europe, had taken place at the same exact time. Both crimes were carried out with essential details, like the same manner of cutting, depth and length, and brutality before the act of murder. Even the circumstances of the random victims were extremely similar, besides the separation by many thousands of kilometers. This information about the new crimes was given to psychologists for interpretation, but leaving an important detail out: time. The scholars in this field, more than 20 psychologists, received information about the other crimes, but the key were the last 2 of them. It is not difficult to guess that all psychologists without a hitch unequivocally determined that this was the work of the same person. He must have had a disciple. Such an opinion stuck on the lips of all employees of the services that were dealing with the case of Vincent Palmer. For this reason, they looked deeper for the answer to the identity of this man. After more than a dozen analyses of his files, they found the same thing. He had no wife, and his parents and siblings died in an accident when he was only 18 years old. He worked odd jobs at various unpromising constructions, warehouses, and transportation companies, Besides trying his hand as a cook and pizza delivery man, now he was a zoo worker. The most interesting part was his IQ and outstanding results in humanities and historical studies, with an additional introduction to theology that could have directed him towards a better life. But what happened? He received a huge hit from life, and yet he managed to survive by keeping a cool head. Besides, he was often seen in the church and belonged to a local volunteer organization. He also had never been charged with anything, not even a speeding or parking ticket. One could say that he was pure goodness, elusive and unpredictable. He could strike anywhere and leave no trace behind, as he disappeared and reappeared like a ghost. Charles Cavan, however, did not give up. He reanalyzed all the information gathered on Palmer's victims and, as you might have guessed, there was no common denominator. But there was a catch. Each successive killing reinforced the belief that Palmer did not act as chaotically as it initially seemed like. He had killed 63 people in various places around the world, not getting caught on capture even once, which is impossible with the dense surveillance system that we have nowadays. He was never spotted by accident, but that did not mean that he did not reveal himself with full intent. These unusual incidents occurred 3 times, behind the 15th, 17th, and 23rd murder, which coincided with the days of the months, interestingly enough, and each of these took place on different continents. First, on the United States, then Asia, and finally, Europe. What was the purpose? What was he trying to convey? And most importantly, why was no one able to catch him? In addition, Vincent was being hunted by all clandestine and overt services. How did he do it? How was he able to remain invisible and still continue killing, even having everyone behind him? He had to shop, visit the doctor, pay bills, necessary things that all of us have to do. Once again, logic pointed to the existence of an accomplice. His face was well known because of the large posters in every pole and billboard on every street. Following the logic of the alleged accomplice, however, one could end up having an unlikely theory. Assuming theoretically that such an accomplice ever existed, what purpose would he or she have? This was not about money. If Vincent did not have any money, why would someone help him for free while risking their life? Because the electric chair for being an accomplice was a certainty. Besides, not many people in the world could put up with such gruesome actions. But everything has its other side, so we could consider that Vincent could have enlisted to help a mentally ill person, infinitely faithful to his equally sick idea, or he could have blackmailed someone. As we know, blackmail could have multiple dimensions, so although this was a valid assumption, it did not bring any clarity to the situation. It was also impossible to specify what wood this blackmail could consist in. There was also the issue with the common denominator. Charles convinced himself that he had to stop thinking like he usually did in order to find a potential thread that connected the victims. Vincent Palmer was almost irrational, and he therefore had to be approached in the same way. A change of perspective is crucial while trying to understand many problems, so the inspector indulged in almost abstract thoughts, so far from the logic that one could say that Charles had become an artist for a moment, whose own mind had endowed him with phenomenal visions that would spark the interest of many arts if they would be put on paper or canvas. This nonsense made him aware of one trivial nuance. It happened one Saturday evening when Charles was on his day off, as he indulged in an intense meditation that eventually wore him out. He had not eaten or drunk anything in the whole day when he got up from his meditation position, becoming dizzy. He then said up something like, "This is not good for my health." Only then it dawned on him. Health. The common denominator could be health. The very next day, a Sunday, the inspector called his people together, even though some of them were on vacation. He did not mind because he would drag everyone to the police station and have them get health information on every victim. It was not that easy, but it was not impossible either. After 2 days, Charles received a detailed report The common denominator turned out to be the health status of the victims. Their bodies were downright pristine. They did not have any genetic defects, not in appearance or in their internal organs. And this was not everything, since they also discovered that the age range of the victims was from 19 to 45 years old. None of them suffered from any chronic disease or serious illnesses on their records, and the only things they had on record were vaccinations and periodic examinations at work, which was understandable. They also had something else in common: yoga, meditation, martial arts, fanatical faith, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christianity, interest in numerology, tarot, and occultism. In a sense, this could be subsumed under the concern for one's spiritual state. The common denominator was also the fact that the victims never had any contact with each other, which in the initial phase of the investigation seemed to be a hindrance, but turned out to be a clue later on. But where did this lead to? As it happens in every investigation, or it should, there was a breakthrough, although a more appropriate term would be coincidence. The elusive spectre, Vincent Palmer, was spotted by a random person who showed a lot of courage by following such a degenerate that is surrounded by a rousing mystery. This accidental hero was in constant contact with the police as it led the officers to the place where Vincent went, a Christian church. The anti-terrorist squad arrived at the place a few minutes later and immediately stormed in through the gigantic doors. A squad of 20 men entered with full momentum, taking the risk of encountering civilians in the face of confronting Vincent. The commander issued a simple instruction: incapacitate everyone. The intention of this action was to leave no room for anyone to escape. They went in as the church was surrounded by all units available, leaving no chance for anyone to slip one way or the other. Everyone was on high alert, and since the police were not disguised, could anything go wrong? Charles's impatience reached a crescendo, and he could not stand it. It was taking too long, so he ran into the church, hoping to see the anti-terrorists handcuffing Vincent. It turns out that no one could handcuff him because everyone was already dead. Charles did not see any civilians, dead or alive. It was as if this had been carefully planned. It was dark inside, and the only source of light was the flashlights attached to the machine guns shining in random directions, depending on the position of their dead owners. Charles held the gun confidently in front of him, stepping very carefully so as not to trip over any of the bodies. His heart was pounding so loud that even he could hear it. Unable to stand the pressure, he shouted, "Vincent, show yourself, damn it!" A huge door banged, where the others tried to enter a moment later. "Find me," a voice whispered. The whisper seemed to came from over his right shoulder, and the inspector immediately turned around and fired into the air. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, reaching for his automatic weapon. He pulled the trigger and did not stop until he had emptied the magazine. He spun around, hoping for one of the bullets to reach the enemy. At the sound of the shots, those who were trying to force their way through the church doors decided to abandon their actions for their safety. Charles fired the entire contents of the magazine and reached for another weapon, doing the same from a different angle, aiming slightly lower this time. The third time, in turn, he aimed higher than the first. When he reached for the fourth rifle, he paused and strode towards the altar, trying to be surprised from between the pews. He then stepped onto the altar and began looking out for any movement inside the place, when he heard, "I know you're scared." Once again, the whisper came from over his shoulder. Charles fired a few shots at the air. "You are probably wondering what is even going on here," the whisper rang out from several directions simultaneously. "I did what I thought was necessary. Those who lay here are proof of what I have achieved. That is the way it is here. When you achieve the impossible suddenly becomes real." "Who the fuck are you?" Charles shouted. "Who I am, it is not important. The important is who I can become," Vincent corrected. "Right now, I am like a maggot, imperfect. I needed food, lots of food. Fortunately, I have had enough, unless I can still take care of you, Inspector." "You are sick." "You are right," he replied. "Absolutely, but I have found a cure, and I will soon get rid of the weight on my shoulders." "How did you kill a trained squad?" "They were simply blind. What more can I say?" "Why do you kill?" Charles asked nervously, looking around to different sides of the temple. "Even if I told you, Inspector, you would not understand. It has taken me over 10 years to understand. Only now I feel close. I feel that all I ever wanted is at my fingertips. I need one more thing, Inspector." Something pushed Charles off the altar. It was not human interference because he did not feel anyone touching him. Cavan collapsed on the floor, bruising a few bones, but he had no time to dwell on his pain. He got up as quickly as he fell, aiming in front of him and seeing the notorious Vincent Palmer in person, approaching him with a large knife, reminiscent of the kind often seen in ritual scenes in movies. Charles pulled the trigger without releasing his grip until the last bullet had sunk into Vincent's body, and the mysterious degenerate fell to the floor with a mocking smile, remaining with this expression on his face after his last breath. How was it possible that he could take out an entire squad but could not deal with one man? Why did he not kill Charles, having several, if not a dozen, favorable situations to do so? The most important thing for everyone was that Palmer's body rested underground, so he would not kill anyone else. It was hard for the international services to breathe after so many years dealing with this case. No one believed that this was the end of the deadly specter that walked through their cities claiming victims. The Vincent Palmer case was finally closed nonetheless, and the signed report showed only one thing: a long and well-deserved vacation. As Charles sat on the porch of his log cabin in the mountains, each day of his stay, he was able to think about one thing only: what he heard that twisted evening, and what it could possibly mean. He took these mysteries with him to the grave. The fact was that Vincent possessed dark abilities that could not be rationally explained. Was it magic, possession, or powers from another world? Why did he say that he was like a maggot? If these were only Vincent's delusions, he had achieved something that not a few psychopaths, erroneously described as the most dangerous in the world, could achieve. 3 months later, the police station where Charles worked at received a report of the disappearance of 25-year-old woman Emily Norras, an intern at the local Adam Meisenson hospital. 48 hours after the police started the regular procedures, another disappearance was informed. This time, it was Peter Nishis, a parking attendant. Every 48 hours they received one more report, 3 of them. Like it happened on the last investigation, it seemed as if there was no common denominator between the missing subjects. For the next 2 months, and with no results, the service searched vacant and abandoned old buildings. Most of the city's basements, and friends and family of the missing people were interviewed. Announcements were made on radio and television, and posters were put up in the same places where Vincent Palmer's face once appeared. An impossible incident occurred one night in December, when Rick, the duty officer in charge of watching the surveillance cameras, noticed something disturbing, as if some dark force was suddenly trying to grab him with its claws. A man in a hoodie, standing in front of the police station, stared at the camera lens for a few minutes, while Rick shuddered with indefinable unease. This uneasiness came for a reason. When the man removed his hood, the face of Vincent Palmer appeared. A man whose body had been resting underground for many months. Rick immediately grabbed his gun and ran outside the building, taking several officers with him, but they did not find anyone there, as expected. The most mysterious fact was that there were no tracks on the snow where Vincent was standing. Fortunately, the camera footage survived, which was not given because of Palmer's paranormal background. Several copies had been made on different devices as prevention before sending the file to every service that had worked with the local before. Charles could not believe it, even though he was facing hard evidence of the fact that Palmer was alive. He went to the cemetery, along with the coroner and the judge, to dig up the coffin. They found a body in an advanced state of decomposition, a sight that seemed straight out of a horror movie, but that was only the beginning. Soon after Vincent was caught on camera, vandalism started to be reported through the city as strange paintings and graffiti showed up in the walls of buildings. These were not, but strange inscriptions composed of disturbing symbols, written once vertically, once horizontally. Some of them were framed in squares, triangles, or circles, flattened on both parallel sides by regular lines, once vertically, once horizontally. The appearance of the unusual writing and the identity of its author was a mystery, although they had one only suspect. The problem cleared up quickly, since it took 2 days to determine who was responsible for this act of vandalism, when a night patrol caught a person trying to spray paint something on the door of a church, the same church where the well-known macabre took place not long ago. The detainee was not eager to talk, and when he was asked, "Who are you?" he replied, "A new beginning." The detainee was asked several questions, and all of them were followed by equally idiotic answers. After 48 hours in custody, he was asked basic questions once again, in the hope of rethinking his answers after being behind bars, but the police had to spread their arms. A devastation charge would also add nothing to the case, so the police decided to let him go with a warning. While the new beginning was sitting in a cell at the police station, several more messiahs, following the same fierce philosophy of life, were caught, unsurprisingly. They were also ordered to be followed, and the police let them go for an important reason. When someone from the sect was detained, others would take their place and go to the streets, not hiding what they were doing. Since the number of followers of the mysterious cult was growing each day, the police thought that this implied the existence of a hiding place. As it turned out, the hiding place was the catacombs forgotten by the world that had an entrance under the infamous church. Charles, who he did not take part in the interrogation of suspects, decided to go to their headquarters on a spy mission, risking that someone could recognize him. He learned about the entrance from one of the police officers tasked to keep track of the cult members. Leaving aside a few details and concluding with the question, why wasn't Charles accompanied by an organized anti-terrorist operation? The answer is fairly simple. The information related to this case can be illuminated a bit more with peace of mind. First, given the vast underground architecture, it would have taken a lot of time to come up with a plan, and it would cause a raid that would alert the sect members, leading to some of them to escape. Besides, if a fire was opened, it was unpredictable to know how the old walls and ceiling would behave during the tremors. The matter had to be handled from the inside, and the priority was to catch the leader. This leader, of course, turned out to be the demonic Vincent Palmer. The reconnaissance took place in a large hall that was lit with torches, coke ovens, and candles, and Charles experienced something that defied the laws of science, starting with the sight of Vincent alive, while someone like him was decomposing in an oak coffin. Vincent spoke. "Today, the miracle of resurrection will take place before your eyes. All of you know that I have already taken my life once, yet I am here, standing among the living. God made people die. I will make people live forever, but eternity will belong to the elect." Charles saw the crowd react to his words, showing that his followers had been waiting for this day for a long time. They were standing before a promise already heard before that was about to come true. "I will now ask of you to come to the altar of sacrifice. Perhaps you," he pointed to the first person on the right, and then he reassured them. "Calm down, I will not sacrifice you. Take this piece of paper. I will write on it a series of numbers that only my assistant and I will know. I will put the piece of paper in an envelope and hand it to you. I will then make the supreme sacrifice, and your old life will stop having meaning from now on. With me, You will rise to the heights of human existence. This world is at your fingertips, controlled by the wicked. Look, I have been pursued by people who commit equally heinous crimes every day, acting in the name of the law, a law that they created and can change to suit their own needs with impunity. Enough of false prophets, leaders, and gods. These rulers have blinded you with their empty propaganda. Enough of that. He dipped a goose quill in ink and wrote a string of numbers. I'll leave it in your hands. It will be needed in a moment, he said to the volunteer, and then turned again to his assistant. Bring in the vessel, he ordered. Behind the altar, Charles did not manage to see how a brass double door opened and 4 worshippers came out of it, leading a young, frightened woman. She was Emily Norras, a missing person from some time ago. Vincent asked for her to be placed on the altar and bound. Someone emerged from the shadows and handed him a long ritual knife with which he slit his hand and paint strange symbols on Emily's forehead with his blood. He stepped out from behind the altar to get in front of everyone and asked for the whispers to cease. Now, the only thing that could be heard was the crackling of hearths and torches. He raised the knife high, majestically, staring at the gleaming blade for several seconds. He moved his mouth a few times, took a deep breath, and pierced it near his heart. Panic and horror gripped Vincent's followers as a general uproar broke out, lasting for several minutes. Some wanted to leave the catacombs when something happened. The assistant ordered everyone to quiet down. After Emily's terror passed, she began to say something in an unnatural and frightened tone. She recited the same string of numbers that was enclosed in the envelope, and that is when everyone realized that it was not Emily Norras, but Vincent Palmer. The bonds were cut as Vincent's spirit-possessed body quickly slid off the altar. Here I am, your shepherd. You now understand that sacrifice is required for what you will have to do. All cannot survive, but those who survive will live forever. The followers knelt before their savior in a wave. Kidnap people from official positions, take over their bodies, and sow confusion in their structures. We will start there. We will introduce anarchy throughout the world, and when the time is right, we will reveal ourselves. Once they see the power we wield, they will give up power out of fear, and we will take over the world. Next week, there will be another meeting. During this time, gather information about your vessels and clear your minds. He will give you the knowledge to conquer this world for us. Now, dear listener, you will make a choice of the ending of this story. You have 2 endings to choose from. Ending 1, Charles stays in the catacombs. Ending 2, Charles leaves the catacombs. Both endings will be marked as chapters on the timeline. Ending 1, Charles stays in the catacombs. Vincent crossed the brass door and disappeared into the darkness that reigned on the other side. After that, it took a moment before over 100 people left the main hall through the narrow corridors, and Charles waited until the last one of them had left before walking up the steps leading to the altar. He looked at the bloody body of the first Vincent and gently pushed the door open. He cautiously poked his head out to analyze the situation, but the poor lighting made it difficult for him to discern the situation. He took the flashlight out of his sweatshirt and directed its light ahead of him, carefully closing the door behind him and glancing around the room. It was a back room with ceremonial objects, like robes, knives, jars of blood, and piles of bones, probably of animal nature, stacked in every corner of the chamber. On the walls hung objects made of bones, resembling giant necklaces. It was most likely that those were human bones that had been altered for jewelry, so to speak. On the opposite, there was another door that led to a long, narrow corridor leading to another chamber. It was a huge and perfectly round room that was glowing from the ceiling with a rotten greenery of unknown origin. On the other side, a 3 meters high statue that, at first glance, could be associated with some dark, forgotten deity. Charles, who was not an expert in the field of art, could not determine from which period of origin the artwork was from. He shuddered at the sight of the sculpture, as the arch-demonic face had eyes that seemed to be alive, emanating material darkness that pierced his body through. After everything Charles had witnessed, he hesitated to come closer for fear of the unknown force he might have to confront. However, he did so. He pulled out his gun and looked around the room, making sure that there were no other corridors or doors, indicating that the place where he was in could be left. In that case, where had Palmer gone? There was no exit behind the statue either. Perhaps he was hidden. He did not have to wait long for the situation to develop, as he heard Vincent greeting him behind his back. He was standing behind him, waiting in the passage of the hallway from which Charles had just come from. "Welcome to my humble abode," he said, in a soft, feminine voice. "I see that you have met the majesty of the unknown God. It is said that he has been hiding from all the deities of the whole world since the moment of creation. Some say that he was here before anything was created, hiding and waiting to come out when civilization is ready. No one knows why. I have faith that my Lord has prepared me for something great, so great that are no words in all the languages known to man able to describe it." "No miracles, Palmer. I followed you to make sure you don't have another resurrection." Charles spitted. Vincent burst into a squeaky laugh. "Really? You were the one who followed me? I knew that you would show up. I sent my servant to lead you on my trail. Do you know what the best part is? After you killed me, I grew unimaginably powerful. Everyone thought I was lying quietly a few feet underground while I was setting up pawns all over the world. Come on, I know you want to ask me something. Ask me, and I shall give you all the information you ask. I will tell you everything, without exception, Charles Cavan." "In exchange for what?" "You know that everything has a price, but it should only be discussed after you know the offer." "The offer?" he asked, nervously squeezing the gun. Vincent took 2 lazy steps forward. "Yes, it will be one of those offers that you simple cannot turn down. We will discuss it in a moment. Now ask. Even I am consumed with curiosity as to what has impressed you the most, Charles. You see, we are both curious about each other." Charles concluded that nothing would be lost in the possibility of learning the truth, and he began to ask. "I saw your body in the coffin," Charles claimed. "That is how you dug it up. I saw you digging nervously, and you almost did not break style." Vincent smiled mockingly. "Did you see it? It is an art known for centuries. Instead of being tracked, you track yourself to be in control. I knew every move you made, Charles. I was everywhere. Not always directly, but I was there." "You have people at the police station," he concluded, shaking his head with disappointment. "At the police station, the prosecutor's office, the morgue, the pet store, the tire factory. I can go on and on." Charles was momentarily frozen, unable to collect his thoughts. "Wake up, Charles. I am here. Whose body was in that coffin? To live on, you must have another body, and that one was identical." "That is right, Charles. How could this happen? Think about it for a minute. How could I have the same body? It is impossible. Nothing is impossible in this world. I am the shining example of that. Remember that. Go on." "You would have to have a twin," the inspector finished. "And what is so strange about that?" "There is nothing about that in your file." "No, there was not. His name was not Palmer. I found him by accident, and fortunately I was able to take care of him before I started my plan. That is pretty messed up, even I have to admit it." "If you have that kind of ability, why did you have so many victims? Why did you kill so much?" "I told you that I was a maggot, remember? I needed healthy bodies and minds. Those have the energy I needed. When I was finally ready, I died to be reborn again. Now, I can be reborn indefinitely." "That remains to be seen." Charles aimed straight for the head and pulled the trigger. Vincent dodged the bullet with inhuman agility. and the room went dark. Charles felt a burning sensation in his hand which made him drop the gun. Rotten greenery decorated the ceiling once again, and Palmer was already standing across from Charles. He knocking him towards the wall by hit his sternum, making him hit his back and losing consciousness. The next day, 2 announcements were made at the police station. The first one was that Vincent Palmer was dead. The other one was Emily Norris, the missing girl, was found dead, unfortunately. The case was finally closed. The details of the previous night were accurately described in the report that Inspector Charles Cavan had just signed. Ending 2. Charles leaves the catacombs. Once the cult meeting was over, Charles wanted to leave this horrifying place as soon as possible. When he got to the surface, he struggled with his thoughts. Should he report what he had just witnessed, or should he try to find another solution? He had been confronted with something that was far beyond the comprehension of a simple man. It involved foul powers that can bend human nature or annihilate it in favor of something unknown to mankind. So what should Charles do besides go to the police station? He would talk about how Vincent transferred his consciousness to another body. He then thought about a certain exorcist who once preached as a guest of the parish, giving a sermon about possession and the effects of practicing the occult. Charles thought that if anyone could help and answer his questions, it had to be a specialist with experience, and that was Benedetto Adoara. 3 days later, the meeting took place at the See of Peter. Charles had contacts that allowed him to connect with the priest by phone beforehand to arrange a meeting. The inspector took electronic copies of the case file with him and a recording from a hidden camera that was attached to his clothing during the underground meeting of Vincent's sect. Father Benedetto's face showed that the problem that Charles was dealing with was one of those that bring out the worst thoughts, horror, and very peculiar sensations. The priest was a man of 60 years old who had seniority fighting against evil powers, but the horror that he saw on the video was able to take hold of his mind for a while. Charles remained silent for quite a long time, hoping to get any information. Finally, he could not bear the tension and decided to ask, "What can you tell me about what you saw?" The priest remained silent, staring at the now-defunct laptop screen. "Please, priest," he repeated loudly, shaking the man up. Yes. I do not know where to begin or whether to begin at all. As a layman, you do not have certain rights to give you access to information on this subject. I would add, not even most of the clergy in the Vatican have such powers. Please, priest, many people have died, and the number of victims will continue to increase. I cannot stop him with a firearm. I have already tried. Deducting from what you have said, I already have knowledge that is not given even to the clergy. Priest, we are at war, and we must join forces. I do not care about your rights. I just want to solve this problem. I want to stop this permanently. Do you understand, Father? I understand you perfectly, but you are facing something that can destroy you. If you want to take an active part in what is to come, you must know that there is no way back. What should I do then? He asked, with a mixture of exasperation and contemplation. Not now and not here, Benedetto replied with an absent look. When and where? Come to my office at midnight. We will walk somewhere. At least for now, it is best if very few people see us. It was midnight. The inspector visited Benedetto's office as instructed, and from there they went to the archives in the basement. This place was very well guarded by a security guard and managed by one of the priests. Charles had reservations, as he did not think that they would let him in, but his guide said a short phrase to his fellow priest. As we agreed, Father Daniel, a favor for a favor. The man replied by nodding his head. As you can see, there are unofficial debts of gratitude even in the Vatican. They walked through a bulletproof glass door with motion sensors as a cold lead light illuminated the space around them. The priest led him through a maze of bookcases that was filled with old books and scrolls. Even, they reached another door that looked like the main one, leading to a small glass room that was additionally protected from the inside with thick bars. No, he cut off. This book is perhaps one of the greatest mysteries of our faith. The author of the book is unknown, but the information that contains it has been examined by many clerical experts. All but one of them have been officially declared true. Except for one, says the priest. Yes, it is known to everyone that Lucifer was the first to betray God, which is true. This book, however, corrects one aspect. He was the first to betray, but not the first to plan a betrayal. There was another angel, unknown to mankind, and it is supposed that God himself had concerns about him. The question is, why, if God created him? That is a good question. According to what is contained here, he said, patting the back of the book, this unknown angel was not an angel, and it was not created by the God we profess. Until now, the Church has considered this knowledge to be a heresy that cannot see the light of day, so it has been locked away here from the world. We had to come here personally, because no document can leave the archives, not even for a minute. There is a death penalty for something like this. The death penalty? Charles asked in disbelief. Every society has its secrets, Inspector. Every society. This unknown angel, according to what is described in this book, is waiting until the forces of Lucifer and God have weakened from the war waged between them for centuries. The Unknown One aims to reveal its identity once it has taken over the world, declaring itself as the new God who will walk among men. He promised that the chosen ones will live forever, but not everyone will be chosen. The price of immortality is terrifying. A life for a life, Charles finished. Chosen humanity will grow their vessels naturally and through cloning. Look at these symbols. He opened the book. The same ones that are painted on every street in my city. It is both interesting and frightening, but let me ask you the most important question. Who is Vincent Palmer? Charles asked, immediately regretting the question. Vincent Palmer is, in fact, Rem Laptenek Niv, created, hidden, unknown, revealed.